Well, welcome, Julie Bell. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here. This is fun. We've been waiting to do this for a long time.
Well, you've had a really long, successful career. So, where did it all start? When did you first decide you wanted to be an artist?
Oh, well, I think that was just it wasn't so much a decision as a just, the way it came out. I just kind of born that way, really. I remember, as a little kid, like just like art was always on my mind. And when I was in elementary school, the first time I really spoke it out loud that I want to be an artist, one of my teachers in fifth grade asked me what my goals were, and I was like, "What are you even talking about? I have no idea." And she's like, "You have to have a goal." So I was like, "Okay, I'll be an artist." So that was the first time I said it. But honestly, I had no idea as I got older, like how do you make a living as an artist? And all I had known were art teachers, and so it was a very mysterious world to figure out.
So, how did you actually get into art then? What was your first commission?
My first commission, well, like before I was doing the kind of art I'm doing now,
Yeah.
um, years before that, actually, my first commission was actually in high school, to do portraits of my teachers for a special thing they were doing. Um, and then I had a couple of children's books that I illustrated that were like children's novels, really. Not really like an illustrated picture book, but a illustrated novel that I just did drawings for. And but that was really early, and they were just very low run prints and things like that. So, but when what connected to the art that I do now, my first commission really was. It's hard to remember exactly which came first, but I remember I got a commission from Tor to do a book cover, and also that was a commission that came directly to me, and so that was really exciting. And I think the way it went was that before that, there were a couple of commissions I did for video game covers
Hmm.
that had come to Boris, but he didn't have time to do them. And so he said, "Hey, would you look at Julie's work?" And so, a lot of artists get their start that way when they ask for someone else and that person can't do it. And so it gets, you get
Hmm.
kind of like second look. And so I think really probably that was the first. And then I took my samples of that to tour. I just don't remember the order it all happened in, but it was kind of around the same time.
Right. Okay. So, do you tend to try to get the work yourself then? You haven't got an agent, is that how it works?
Yeah, I haven't really, I did kind of toy with the idea of having an agent at one point, but I was already kind of on my way with my work, an agent to get me art commissions. I was already on my way with my career, and this guy was really, very honest with me, and he said, honestly, I'm not really going to be able to help you more than what you're already doing, so it doesn't make sense. You just need to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I kind of came to an agent a little bit later, and that was really nice of him to do that. And I'm glad I did it that way. I've learned how to, you have to learn to think on your feet a little bit more when you're just doing that. Of course, I had Boris to give me answers and introduce me to some people that really helped at the beginning. But we did used to work with a licensing agent, and that was an interesting thing. That was someone who worked with Boris before I knew him, for a long time before I knew him. And so that was an interesting time.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how that's working right now. We aren't really working with any agents at all right now, except for maybe if you consider a gallery. I'm working with Ray's Gallery in New York City,
Hmm.
and it's not like an agent, but they represent some of my paintings there, and I get
Yeah. Yeah.
occasional commissions through them. But mostly I'm just doing it, myself through the website um, and being on Instagram and Facebook and
Yeah.
just word of mouth from my history. So
How did you meet Boris, if you don't mind me asking?
I had been in a bodybuilding contest, and the guy who was the organizer of that show. I won the show, actually. I got first place in all categories and whatever, big prize winner. And the guy who organized the show, told Boris that I would be a good model for him. And so that's how that came about.
Ah, okay. Do you find that coming from that sort of background, that the bodybuilding aspect, do you think that helps with your figure painting at all?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I had really been, I got into bodybuilding earlier when I was a kid. I was really into a lot of ballet and different kinds of dance forms, tap dancing and modern dancing and all that. And also, then in high school, I got into gymnastics. So I really have always been like a fairly athletic person. I never was really into team sports like football or basketball or anything because I can't stand being pushed around and having people yell at me and blow whistles at me and that kind of thing. So, you find in gymnastics, you can get a lot of really rough treatment if you take it that seriously, but at the level I was at, it was just, it wasn't like that. So it was more of an individual kind of thing. But yeah, just being, involved in doing any kind of athletic, anything is going to make you aware of how your body moves. And I think, honestly, being involved with ballet and dance in general taught me a lot about creating, visual lines of, interest or energy or whatever, like a composition with your body. It happens when you do dance, especially in something as, as structured as like a ballet or something like that. You're taught to create these lines using all of your, your hands and your eyes and everything. So that is something that really does come into play a lot with my work. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that was one of my questions actually. How did you get the dynamism into your figure painting? But that answered that one.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask you as well is, well, I'll start from the beginning because I'm jumping all over the place. But how much research would you normally do? Let's say you got a book cover commission for a story. How much would you delve into it before you started the painting?
Well, it really depends. Sometimes it's more important to do that than other times. Usually, a lot of times, like I'd say most of the times that I've been commissioned to do a book cover, the author will either say kind of what they're looking for in general, like a certain scene or a certain feeling, or they will direct me to a certain, few pages of the book so that I don't really have that much time to actually read every book. That takes a lot of time. And thankfully now most books are audio books that you can listen, but I still, I like it when the art director kind of tells me what they have in mind. We may not end up going with that exact thing, but it points to what they're thinking of as their their representation. Yeah. So like, for instance, so when I really had not been familiar with the stories of Elric of Melniboné, and when I got this commission to do this big painting that I did recently, but I felt like with that particular thing, because I came to understand what a really important character he is in fantasy literature, in the whole history of fantasy literature. He's a very revered character. And I was like, I just want to know myself, what is it so special about him? And it really became like, wow, I love this story, so so I did end up, I've actually read and reread that, first book of that several times now. And I have another commission to do a big painting of him. And I'm really glad that I have that background with it. It's a deeper understanding, that it really does make a difference with something that, it's like that character. I feel like I really needed to understand him in a deeper level. So it kind of just depends on the commission. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you normally paint on too? Do you paint onto boards normally?
I like the surfaces that are like that. I don't really paint on linen or canvas that often because the texture, it's not my surface. I like what other artists do with it, and I like when I have done it, I enjoyed it, but I love these more kind of slippery surfaces that I can let the paint do interesting things and surprise me
Mm,
and then tame it down or whatever. It really just feels natural to me to work that way. So I tend to work on what's called gesso board, which is basically like a um, hard board that's very smooth, and then it has gesso on it. And you buy it with the gesso already on it, but I put
yeah.
my own gesso on top of that so that it has my own kind of natural texture to it.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I like a little texture, but I want it to be a texture that I understand, you know?
Right, I got it.
Yeah.
What sort of paint do you use? Is it acrylics or oils?
Oh, it's oil for sure.
Oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Do
Yeah.
you
I
find?
start with acrylic actually. I do
Yeah.
start with a pencil and then acrylic. And sometimes I take the acrylic, pretty far before putting the oils on. But it just depends. It's different all the time. But the acrylic is basically an underpainting just to
Yeah.
give me guidance to how to have the structure. But a lot of times it gets lost in the end anyway, and I kind of have to redo, and it becomes just as if it was all oil.
How do you decide on a palette? Because one thing that I love about your paintings is it's really, really vibrant colors. It's really beautiful. The colors themselves are beautiful. So how do you decide on that before you, or does it just evolve as the painting goes?
It does evolve, but there are times, like usually I have a certain idea of what to start with, and then I will choose. I don't ever have. I used to a long time ago. Like Boris is the one who taught me my first techniques for using oil paint, and he uses the same palette,
Hmm.
every time. And then he doesn't end up using all the colors. And I just started feeling like, I'm only going to put out the colors that I believe I'm going to use. And it actually worked better for me to do that because then I didn't get as confused by so many colors. And I kept it a little more, like within certain color range. But then a lot of times I will bring in a surprise color later if I want something to have a different effect as the painting goes on,
Yeah.
but I could make that choice um, in a calmer way for me. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
There's a lot of animals in your work. I love that. I love seeing the animals. Have you got a special interest in animals?
Yeah, for sure. I've always really had a thing like just a love for animals. I mean, I had dogs growing up, and when my very favorite special dog when I was a kid,
Hmm.
is always kind of in the center of things. But my dogs that I have now, um, they all my dragons end up kind of looking a little bit duggy, and it's just I love dogs, and I really love cats. I mean, I had cats too, and I have right now I have grandcats because my sons both have cats, and I sometimes they come. One of them comes and stays with us here when they travel or whatever. So, but yeah, and we had horses growing up also, and
Hmm.
just love animals in general. I really, I don't know, I like the looks of them, of course, and I just like the straightforwardness of their brain. They aren't. I don't know. You feel like there are tricky animals for sure. My dog lies to me all the time, but it's kind of like I can see through it most of the time.
Yeah, I've
Just be
got cats like
clever.
that. How do you? Well, because I've noticed that your animals are really well sort of posed, and obviously when you're painting people, you can ask someone to pose for you in a certain pose. So how do you get how do you get the animals to pose like that? How do you go about researching that, or what do you do there?
Well, I can't ask. I mean, the dog that I had for the last, 12 years or so, she died recently, but I could ask her to pose. She's a border collie mix, and I could tell her to put her paw a certain way, and she would literally stay like that until I took the picture. But that's it. But other than that, of course, you have to like just take a lot of photos of your animals that you want to work with, and if you want to, sometimes you get just the pose you want right there, but sometimes you need to like combine, drawings with different photos. Like you have like a lot of photos. You have a horse running and doing things,
Yeah.
and you can combine different things as long as the body works with itself, in the end.
Hmm.
But you get different lighting, and that's another thing I think is really, as at least as important as the pose, is the lighting on the animal. And that's a thing that you just have to shoot a whole lot of pictures and then work
Yeah.
with those pictures to combine them how you need them to be.
Right. Okay. Another thing I like about your paintings, they're very reminiscent of the old, the classics like Caravaggio and Titian in terms of composition and color, and the drama there. Was that ever an inspiration of yours?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I just really, have been, I never actually took an art history class in my life, but I have been on my own studying art history, just as a person.
Hmm.
And actually, my first introduction to even looking at that stuff was when I was first in college, and I took my first life drawing class. The teacher had us. He had us buy a book called, I think it was called Drawings of, I can't remember, it was called Drawings of the Old Masters or something like that. And he had us copy their chalk drawings or their ink drawings, like verbatim, like each line. He wanted us to really copy it and understand why that artist, would do that. And so it really was a fantastic way to learn from someone who has not been alive for hundreds of years, just to copy directly the lines that you have there, because you understand, it's like getting a private lesson from that artist.
Hmm.
But and that was, of course, these were these old masters that you're talking about. And so it was my first, and like, it wasn't an art history class, it was a life drawing class,
Yeah.
but it was learning from their work. And so, yeah, that really did have a big influence on me, and learning about how the deep shadows and the information within the shadows and all that kind of thing. And of course, Boris, a lot of his work is also influenced by
Hmm.
that same thing. And so, I was influenced by him as well. So, and it's a beautiful thing to look at. It gives everything so much more form and,
Hmm.
drama, and, it's just more exciting to look at, I think, in general. I mean, I love when I see a beautiful painting that's done with a filtered light that's, just a very even light, like some of the naturalist paintings are just gorgeous,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's, a whole different thing. So playing with the values, the light and the dark, is a really fascinating way to think about your artwork as you're making it.
Yeah. How do you build up those brilliant skin tones that you managed to get?
I do build it up, is exactly how it works. Um, I guess the first thing when I'm painting is that like I said, I choose certain colors that I decide I'm going to be using,
Hmm.
and then I just have those colors on my palette to start with. And then I just take a fairly large brush and just block it, like, kind of carelessly and fast to
Hmm.
begin with, to just get a sense of form and light, and the temperature of the color more than the actual color,
Yeah.
and just really basic and fast. And then the ideal thing is to do that and let it dry, assuming you have that kind of time for your piece, depending on what you're doing. But if you let that dry, usually then when you go in and you refine it with more careful study of how you're going to make those shapes and everything and the colors, you'll have such a great base to work on, that when you layer it on, it just goes so fast and so easy. It's just like, it's just a great experience. It feels good to do that, have it already
Yeah.
locked in, and then just paint right on top of that after it's dry. I love that. Yeah, and then you can always glaze more color in anytime you want to. If you feel like you've made things too muddy or dirty, you can clean it up by putting different colors on there or changing what's surrounding it or things like that.
Yeah. Hmm. I know you've done a lot of comic book art as well, haven't you? How protective are people like DC and Marvel of their superheroes? You know, do they ever come back and say, actually, that looks wrong or something like that?
Wait, tell me, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Oh, sorry, you've done some comic book covers, haven't you? Things like
Yeah,
Captain
well,
America.
painted work for them. Yes,
Yeah,
it's
yes.
more trading. It was more their trading cards that was a lot of the work was, but some of them were covers. Yeah.
Ah, so are they very protective of their the way that the characters look?
Oh,
So
for sure. Yeah, yeah. It has to fit within what they expect from their characters. Yeah, I remember, in fact, the first time I painted Spider-Man, I it was actually not for Marvel directly, but it was for a book publisher called Byron Price, and they were doing like novels of, like a book in a book novel of the same kind of stories that were in the comic books, but as a novel. And so they wanted me to do this cover of Spider-Man with Carnage, and man, did I just get it wrong, and it was so horrible. It was this painting I did that was, I think I just felt like, oh, I understand. It was after I had already been doing a lot of Marvel characters, and I really knew Spider-Man. I'd been reading Spider-Man for years, so I understood Spider-Man, but I didn't understand the visuals of how to create Spider-Man at that time. And so I did this really stiff and boring and uninspired painting of Spider-Man and Carnage, and I was like, this is fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. And I handed it in, and it actually got rejected by Marvel. I
right.
know. And I was like horrified. I was like, this is the worst thing that ever happened in my whole life, which, of course I was dead. But anyway, so I said, so they said, we'll get another artist, because they felt like I didn't know how to do it. And I was like, oh my God, I can't leave it like this. I was like, let me just do it again. Just give me like a couple of weeks, and I will come up with something really good for you. I'll redo it, start from the beginning. And I actually went to New York like the next day or something, and met with one of the editors there and said, please advise me about Spider-Man. I want to understand what is wrong here, And so he talked to me and gave me some pointers. And so then I did a painting that did turn out to be really good, and they loved it, and everybody's happy, yay! But it was so horrifying to be rejected like that. I just felt like so embarrassed.
Well, what's the hardest character that you've ever had to paint, would you say?
The hardest character?
Yeah, super.
Um, hmm. Nothing really stands out at this moment. Um, I just feel like painting anything is just a matter of getting to understand it,
Yeah,
uh, to the level that you want. I think there is one painting that I want to do that I made an attempt at it and really didn't get it right. It's for myself. It's for a story that I wrote, and it's my own character. And it's a moment in the story that is this, indescribable feeling that this character is having. And I think it's just so abstract that I'm trying to paint something that probably should not be attempted, because once you nail it down as a visual painting, you probably are going to kill it. It's like one of those things that you can't do that. And so I feel like I'm stepping in like territory of the gods or something, I'm like overreaching my human boundary here or something. But so that's the hardest character, my own character having his moment.
Well, it's always intrigued me because I've seen some paintings and you've done them with Boris. So how do you organise that? I mean, do you take it in turns to sit at the painting, or what happens?
Yeah, that's one way we do it, is take turns. It's been different and different paintings and different time periods. There's sometimes that it's, like, especially when we've had work for like an advertising agency, because they generally want things very, very fast.
Yeah.
And even before, there was a lot of, well, yeah, they just always want it fast. I don't understand how the thinking goes with their agencies, because they spend, like, with these campaigns, not necessarily our artwork, but the whole thing entirely. Ad campaigns could be very expensive, and that they generally wait till, like, they're like, we need this in 2 weeks. I'm like, you need something. You knew this a month or two ago. Why didn't you? But anyway, I don't know how that stuff works. The business side of that is very unusual for me. But anyway, when we have to work really fast like that, sometimes we've had to do a painting where we would paint the background separate and then paint the characters on separate pieces, and we would both be painting different parts of it, to make it. And then we could take those individually in the computer, take them and put them together. It still is a painting. It's not a digital painting. It's an oil painting, but and it has the feeling of an oil painting, which is different. But also the people at the advertising agency can move it around to fit their own format. Maybe they want it as a billboard, it's got to be very wide, or if they want it to be in a magazine, it's got to be more vertical, so they can adjust it how they want, or take pieces of it out or whatever. So, and then there are other times that we work together, and it's just that, maybe Boris feels more like this is the part of the process that he wants to do, and he doesn't really want to do the rest, or I feel the same way, or whatever. So we'll just do it, whatever happens. It's very organic, depending on the needs and how we feel, and it's not really one set way each time.
Right.
The thing that's fantastic about doing those collaborative paintings is that, just like when I mentioned, with drawing from the old masters' drawings, that I learned so much by, redoing, like making a master copy of their drawings. Working with Boris has taught me, like, the difference between what would come out naturally for me and what he would do. And it gives me just those tools, it gives me the ability to, okay, Boris would think this way with this. And I can't be Boris, but I can understand a lot more of what is the difference, and I don't want to try to be Boris. I want my own art to be its own thing and have its own voice, and it does. But I like having more tools, no matter what.
Speaking of computers, have you tried to actually paint using a computer? Have you tried using digital tools to make art at all?
A long time ago, when we first got Photoshop, we were doing that. And when I think back on how I did that, it's nuts. How the clumsy, primitive way that I was working. But yeah, but we did a few things, but we're not digital artists. But at this point, we do use the computer for things like, for instance, sometimes we will paint a painting where the figure is nude, because maybe somebody has commissioned it that way, or because we choose to make the painting that way because it looks nicer, in context with the painting. We want it to be that way. But in our calendar, they can't be nude, because the people who sell the calendars, not that they have something against it, but having it in the stores, people will be like, oh, naked, so I can't have that. So we have to, what we do is we paint the figures the way we want to, and then if they need to have like a bikini or whatever, we can paint on a separate piece of board, that bikini, and it looks like paper doll clothes, and then yeah, it's really fun, because like we have these boards that are just nothing but a bunch of bikinis lined up, from previous paintings where they went on, and then take it and digitally add it. And I have learned, one of my sons does a lot of digital art for his work and video games, and he's taught me enough tools that I can get around, using a mask. I'm so proud of using a mask. And using some of those tools with different brushes and things that I really wasn't doing before, to make it a better job of at least stitching those things together. So it's really helpful tool to have. But I don't for a second try to be a digital artist, because I would fail miserably and it would look so bad.
Well, we can get all of your artwork directly from your website, can't we?
Not all of it, but a all out of it for sure. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And are you going to continue doing the calendars every year, do you think?
Well, hope so. I mean, we've got contracts right now. We're working on the one for well, we just finished up with 2026, so we'll be starting on 2027 next.
Oh,
Yeah, so we usually work, that far ahead.
yeah.
So the
Excellent.
2025 is just now being published. It's now available, and 2026 is already complete. But yep, working on 27 now. So it's really exciting. I love having the calendar because it gives us the opportunity to just like within the framework of the world that has been created in those paintings,
Yeah.
they let us pretty much do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, really lovely artwork. Oh, thank you for this chat. It's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed it.
And me too. Thank you so much, Sean. It's really been great to speak with you and say hi to everybody.
Well, you take care. Thank you.
Okay, you too. Thanks. Bye. Okay, you too. Thanks. Bye. Okay, you too. Thanks.